We studied about dyslexia in the first session of this chapter. That's why I was recommending for you to go back and watch that. So attention deficit disorder people will have lack of focus. People who have ADHD, they will get again disturbed or they will get again frustrated very easily. Because all these things are varied, we call it as a spectrum. Okay, it's a spectrum of different kind of symptoms that we're looking at here. That will cause a lot of social issues and a lot of political issues. You have to keep in mind the severity of the symptoms. Hello everybody, my name is Rohit. I take physical education on behalf of Prep School by Vidhyaashram. In today's class, we will cover the second session of physical education for C.W.S.N, where C.W.S.N is expanded for children with special needs. So if you haven't watched the first session of this class or first session of this chapter, I recommend you go back and watch that first. Otherwise, you will be having trouble understanding this session, because I will be cross-referencing many topics and many little elements from this chapter to that chapter so you could understand it more better. So in order to understand this session more better, go back and watch the first session first of this chapter and then come back and resume this session. Having said that, let's move on with a glance idea or a bird's eye view of this session overview so we can understand what all things we will be covering in this particular session. So first, we'll start off with understanding the types of disorder. In the last session, we studied about different types of disability. In this session, we'll first study about different types of disorder and we'll study about its causes and its nature. So without wasting much time, let's jump into our first topic, that is again different types of disorder. What all different types of disorder we have. Okay, so let's jump into our first topic, that is different types of disorder. So what all different kind of disorders we have, we will see into that. So first we have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It is again abbreviated as ADHD. Okay, what is it? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Then we have sensory processing disorder. What is it? The second one we have is sensory processing disorder. And then we have autism spectrum disorder. Again, it is again abbreviated as ASD. Okay, what is it? Autism spectrum disorder. Then we have oppositional defiant disorder. And finally, we have again obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay, so we will be studying about all these different kind of disorder and its causes and its different nature and what all things will be there in that. Having said that, let's start off with our first topic or the first disorder in the list, that is ADHD, otherwise called as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So what exactly it is? It is a group of behavior symptoms that include inattentiveness, hyperactivity and impulsiveness. In fact, it is a medical condition that affects how well can someone sit still, focus and pay attention. Generally ADHD affected children have difference in parts of their brains that control activity and attention. Okay, so attention deficit disorder people will have lack of focus. Okay, it is a cognitive disability. It is again one of the symptoms that you have in dyslexia. We studied about dyslexia in the first session of this chapter. That's why I was recommending for you to go back and watch that unless you have already watched that session. Okay, so please watch that session, you will understand this session much more better. Okay, so we are talking about different kind of disorders here. The first one is ADHD, and ADHD is what? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, where you will have we have read out this statement, we have read a formal statement about what is ADHD. In simpler terms, if you want to understand, it is nothing but a situation where a person is not able to focus on a particular kind of thing for a longer period of time. That person gets again irritated very fast. Okay, at a particular thing that person will not be able to focus. So a person who is having ADHD will not be having a proper span of attention or a span of focus on a particular kind of thing. Okay, so hoping you understood the meaning of ADHD and the concept of ADHD and the concept of disorder, that is ADHD. Let's move on to the symptoms of ADHD in children. Okay, so since we are talking about children with special needs, we will be talking about ADHD in children, and we will be studying this chapter and different mental disorders and disability in perspective and in context of children facing that. Okay, so we will be looking into symptoms of ADHD in children in focus. Okay, so first thing is that they usually forget about daily activities. That's one thing, that's one of the symptoms that they have. So basically they forget about their daily routine activities. Second thing is that they have difficulty in organizing routine activities. Since they have problem with focusing on a lot of things, since they have a problem on focusing on a particular thing for a long period of time, they will not be keeping anything organized. Okay, their disciplinary will be very bad. Their discipline will be very bad when it comes to organizing. So they have difficulty in organizing routine activities. Then the next point is that they usually indulge in, again, daydreaming. So they will be daydreaming a lot. So people who have ADHD have one more symptom, that is that they do a lot of daydreaming. Now what is daydreaming? Daydreaming is basically dreaming in a day. So basically when you sit and you feel yourself as lost, or you might have faced this situation many times in your classroom also, where one of your friend is lost in some kind of thinking and some kind of thoughts. So that's particularly called as daydreaming. Okay, so people who have ADHD, now that doesn't mean that everybody who daydream is having ADHD. Okay, it's the other way. People who have ADHD have this symptom, but everybody who daydreams doesn't have ADHD. So I want you to have that thought clear in your mind. Having said that, let's move on to our next symptom of ADHD, that is they do not like to perform the activities that require sitting still. Like I said, they get frustrated a lot. They cannot sit at a place for a longer period of time. They cannot focus. They cannot stay still. Their mind will always differ. Okay, they get mood fluctuations a lot. So they don't stay still at a point of time. They don't sit still at a point of time or at a place. So that is another symptoms that they have. After that, the last, they are easily distracted. What is it? They are easily distracted. So they get distracted very easily. Since they have, again, a problem of focusing, it is obvious that a person who is not focused in his work will get distracted very often, right? So small little things that's going around, he will get distracted by that. If you are involved too much in a particular thing, obviously what will happen? You will not be distracted from that. But because ADHD people have a problem of focusing on certain things for a long period of time, they will have this problem of getting distracted too often. One great example I can give you, when you watch a very interesting movie, when you watch your favorite movie, and when you are fully indulged in the picture or indulged in the cinema or TV, whenever somebody calls you from the another room, or if your mom is calling, if your brother is calling, or if your sister is calling, you sometimes don't hear it. The sound is coming to your ears, but you are not focused on that. You are so much focused on the cinema or on the TV that you cannot hear them speaking. So that's kind of, again, focus I'm talking about. So people who have ADHD don't have that kind of a focus or that kind of an attention to whatever they are doing. Since they don't have attention, whatever activities goes around them, they get easily distracted by that. Okay, so they don't focus on a particular thing for a longer period of time. Okay, so they don't focus on a particular thing for a longer period of time. So now let's move on to the next symptom that we have for ADHD. What is it? That is, they usually bounce when they sit. Okay, so they usually have a habit of bouncing at wherever they are sitting. Okay, so that's one weird habit that they have. Like I said, because they cannot sit still, their mind is always fluctuating. That gets reflected in their body. They always keep on moving. They always keep on jumping. They always keep on bouncing at a place wherever they are sitting. So that's one symptom that they have. Then they become restless. Okay, restlessness is one very major and common symptom of ADHD. So people who have problem with ADHD, they have this problem of restlessness. Okay, so then they have some problem with playing quietly. So they don't play quietly. Okay, they don't do any activity, in fact, very quietly. So they always make noise. They disturb others. They get frustrated very fast. They make a fuss about a lot of things. So all these kind of things happen. So now one thing you have to keep in mind is that symptom of a person who has ADHD is different for people who are at different ages in their life or different stages of their life. That's why we are focusing on symptoms in children. Okay, when you talk about ADHD symptoms in adults or people who are again more elder or aged people, it is different. We are talking about children here. So people who have, the children who have again ADHD. So keep in mind, all of these qualities or all of these problems will not be shown by the different age group of people, or all of these problems is not common across all age groups. Okay, it is only for children we are talking about here. Then the next symptom the ADHD children have is, again, they usually talk excessively. Okay, so they keep on talking a lot. Like I said, they don't like quietness. They make a lot of noise. They make a lot of fuss about everything. So they speak a lot. Okay, so that's another symptom that they have. And finally, they do not pay attention. Again, they do not pay attention and usually make careless mistakes. So small little mistakes, they are again used to making very small mistakes. So small little mistakes are made by them a lot. Okay, so small mistakes, when you talk about small mistake, while saying something, while telling something, or doing any kind of activity, they will do silly mistakes that a normal person or a normally healthy person would not do. So these were some of the symptoms of ADHD in children. Having said that, let's move on to our next topic, that is again symptoms in adults. Now when we talked about symptoms in children, you saw quite a lot of symptoms about ADHD. Now we'll look into a glance of what all symptoms could an adult have in this situation of ADHD. First, they may have anxiety attacks. So people who have ADHD, they may have again anxiety attacks. And anxiety attacks is very common in adults who have ADHD. Okay, so that's one major symptom they have. Second, they may be impulsive. They get very impulsive very fast. Okay, so they get impulsive very quickly. They are not cool. Okay, they don't keep their mind cool. They get angry very fast. They make fuss about everything. They get, they get hyped about every small little thing. So all these things will happen there. And after that, they may have problem again controlling anger management issues. Now these people have anger management issue. People who have ADHD, the elders, again adults who have ADHD have anger management issue. They cannot contain the anger. They always show that and they always explode that outside, and the management of their anger is very bad. Now once again, like I'm telling, many of these symptoms are applicable to normal people also. Like everybody gets angry at a certain point of time, right? And some people have short-term anger, some people are short-tempered people, and so they also get angry. They cannot even control their anger. So that doesn't mean that all of them who have such a issue have ADHD. It's the other way around. Okay, it's the other way around. People who have ADHD may show some of these symptoms, but everybody who has such symptoms, one or two symptoms out of this, will not have ADHD. Okay, having said that, let's move on to our next topic, that is they usually have low self-esteem. Okay, so they usually have low esteem. The self-esteem that we talk about, that is very low in them in a usual cases. We are talking about adults, the symptom of ADHD in adults. We are talking about the symptoms of ADHD in adults. Now having said that, let's move on to our next symptom that we have, that is they usually remain unorganized. Now like I said, people who have ADHD, the children who have ADHD have problem organizing. Is the same point over here. So one common symptom that the adults and the children who are having ADHD is one thing, is that they have problem keeping things organized. So if you go to a person's house who has ADHD, you may see his house messed up, right? Things will not be organized, his timings will not be organized, his routine will not be organized. So all these kind of things will happen, or all these kind of symptoms will be showing up in a person who has ADHD. Okay, next, they are easily frustrated. Like we discussed this earlier also many times, people who have ADHD, they will get again disturbed, or they will get again frustrated very easily. They will get pissed off very fast. So that's one thing. Next is mood swings and depressions are again major part of their symptom. So like I said, their mind, their processing system, their nervous system again has fluctuating situations, fluctuating thoughts. So one moment they are feeling something, second moment they are feeling something. It will be just with a flick of time, that person will be very happy, the next moment that person will be very sad, or that person will be very angry. So such kind of bounces in the emotions and uncontrolled emotions and fluctuations will happen to that person. Okay, then they have a problem concentrating, especially while reading. Okay, so when they are reading something, they will have problem in focusing that. They will not be able to focus on certain things when they are reading. So while reading, they may suddenly lose their focus. Now one thing, like I said, why one logical reason why they lose focus is obviously because they don't have that focus of span of attention. They don't have the quality of span of attention. They cannot focus on something for a longer period of time. That's the major symptom. That's the first symptom of ADHD. That's the major and the first symptom, and considered as the main symptom of ADHD. That itself will lead to this point. Okay, so people who have such points, who have such problems will not be able to read, because to read a book or to read a chapter or to read something, you need focus, you need calmness, you need patience. And these people who have ADHD won't have such thing. Okay, so people who are suffering from ADHD won't have a span of focus or a span of attention. So because of that, they will be having trouble reading something also. Okay, so having said that, hoping you understood the symptoms of ADHD in children and in adults, let's move on to our next topic, that is again causes of ADHD. What all things causes ADHD? First thing is the genetic factor. Like we discussed earlier also, many disability and many disorders come from genetic factors also. So your ancestors, the DNA that you got from, the data that you got from their DNA got transferred in yours, and many of the ADHD can also be caused due to genetic factors because one of your ancestors may have had that. Okay, so that's one cause. Second is brain injury. So if you had any unfortunate accident, so if a person had any kind of unfortunate accidents and had a brain injury, that person can also have the problem of ADHD. Next, low birth weight. A child who is just born, and if the birth, there is a certain standard or benchmark of weight a kid should have, a baby should have, a newborn baby should have. If that baby doesn't have that weight, if the baby is lacking weight, that baby may have a chance of getting ADHD. So causes of ADHD, one of the causes that also low birth weight. Next is trauma and brain diseases. Like I said, any kind of trauma if a person has faced, any kind of brain disease if a person has had, that also can cause ADHD. Next, the lack of discipline in the family. Lack of discipline in the family. So if a family, obviously, like there are some of the causes that we study over here are physiological, some of them are genetic, some of them are anatomical, and some of them are environmental. Now this is one environmental cause. Okay, this is one environmental cause that again can cause ADHD artificially, even though if you don't have genetically. Okay, if your family is again maintaining an environment, if you are brought up in an environment, if a person is brought up in an environment where all the symptoms of ADHD is reflected everywhere, if things are unorganized at your home, if you don't have if everybody at your home is having short-temperedness, if fights are going on at home, a lot of different situations are happening, so automatically all those things will affect the mentality and the mind of a person, and that will again end up causing the artificial ADHD. That means why I'm using the word artificial, because you did not have the ADHD by birth, it got you into such situation because of the environment you live in. Okay, so lack of discipline in the family can also cause ADHD. Next is diet. Obviously, nutrition is a very important part of every health aspect of the body. When I talk about physical fitness, mental fitness, or psychological fitness, or social fitness, everything will have to do with what you eat, or your nutrients, what macro and micronutrients you consume. So diet incapacity or diet imbalance can also cause ADHD. Next, you have exposure to toxic substance. Like I said, people who work in the factory, might have got exposed to any kind of chemicals or any kind of substances that is injurious to the health or to the nervous system or to the mind, that can also cause again ADHD. Okay, having said that, let's move on to our next disorder, that is sensory processing disorder. Okay, short form or abbreviated as SPD. What is it? Sensory processing disorder. What exactly it is? It is the condition in which the brain has difficulty in receiving and responding to information that comes in through the senses. Next is, in fact, it refers to the way the nervous system receives messages from the senses and then turns them into proper motor and behavioral responses. In short, when we talk about this, any kind of reflexes, any kind of responses you do to any kind of external activity. So somebody is doing something, if you are doing an activity, how your brain processes that, how your brain interprets that and sends signal back to your muscles to perform or take an action against it or for it. Okay, so suppose if anything is going on, any kind of things that is related to your sensory nervous system, we are talking about SNS over here, so your central nervous system, the sensory part of it, what you see, what you interpret, what you calculate in your mind. So if a person who is having lack of sensory processing disorder, that person's sensory organs will not be in a proper condition, or the sync of neuromuscular coordination will be not good. Okay, so neuromuscular coordination, I have taught many times, the connection between your motor nerves and how it processes, how it takes signal of whatever, how it senses something from the external environment and sends the signal to your brain, and then the brain processes and understand what exactly is that external data, and then sends response to your muscles to take again reaction for it or against it. Okay, so any kind of disorder, for example, when you touch a hot pan of any hot pan or any hot pot of tea, you suddenly remove your hand because it's very hot. Why? Because your motor nerves and reflexes are very fast. Your motor nerves are working very properly. But people who have sensory processing disorder will have such disorders where the processing itself will take time, and they will realize certain things later, and it could cause or pose a lot of problem to them. Okay, so this you have to keep in mind. So in short, sensory processing disorder is the disorder that is in your sensory part of your mind or sensitive part of your cognitive or intellectual system. So the sensory part will not be up to work, or it will be not up to the proper condition or benchmark of a normal healthy human being. Having said that, let's move on to some of the causes of SPD, that is again sensory processing disorder. What all can cause SPD? First cause is again genetic cause. Like I said, majority of the disorders and disability can be transferred from genetic causes. So that's one common cause I need not explain. I have explained it many times. What is genetic cause, how genetically it could get transferred. So genetic can be one cause of SPD. So SPD could get transferred by genetics. Next, you have low birth weight. This also is one common cause that you have from the previous disorder that we studied, that is again attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Okay, then we have environmental factors. So different environmental factor where you live in, that also matters over there. Next, after that, you have physical cause. So physical cause, your physical condition, how you manage, if you have gone through any kind of unfortunate accident, if you have lost certain limbs, or if you have lost the certain sensory part of your body, that is your eyes or ears or anything, that also can cause a lot of problem, or it could be cause SPD. Okay. Now, having said that, let's move on to our next topic, that is ASD, which is again autism spectrum disorder. Autism spectrum disorder, which is abbreviated as ASD. What is it? Now, this is autism, you might have heard a lot of times, but still we will look into the formal statement of what exactly is autism. Autism spectrum disorder is a disorder that affects development. Okay, what is first thing it is? It is a disorder that affects your development. It could be the mental development, it could be the physical development. Here, the word spectrum means the varied activities, the range of symptoms and their severity. Okay, so any range of activities or range of symptoms that may have, that is the reason why a spectrum name is given, because spectrum is dynamic and it is in a variety. Okay, so generally the young children with ASD have difficulties with communication, language, social skills and behavior. So people who have the children who are getting ASD, like I said, all these disorder, the way children behaves, or the way children shows the symptoms, the way adults show the symptoms to certain disorders are different. When you talk about children, they generally face the difficulty with communication, difficulty with linguistics, that is language, social skills and behavioral skills. So different kind of such things will happen. So because all these things are varied, we call it as a spectrum. Okay, it's a spectrum of different kind of symptoms that we are looking at here. Then in other words, autism spectrum disorders are characterized by social interaction difficulties, communication challenges and a tendency to engage in repetitive behavior. So people who have autism tend to repeat certain things again and again. Okay, it's just like people who are having obsessive compulsion disorder, that we will see later what exactly is that thing. Same way, we will talk about autism now. In autism, people tend to do certain activities multiple times. Okay, and they have some behavioral disorders, some behavioral pattern disorders. Our brain works in pattern, just like a computer programming, which is based on certain numerical values and numerical data, which is converted into human language. Just like that, even our brain has certain kind of communication and data management system. The processing, how does our brain process certain kind of thing that you are seeing. Now you're watching this class. Now I'm telling you few things. I'm teaching you certain things. But the way I'm teaching you, the way I'm telling you certain things, you may be, you are not just directly registering it in your mind, right? Whatever I'm teaching you now, whatever I'm telling it to you, you are not directly taking it into your mind. You are listening to it. You are processing what I'm saying, you're trying to understand it, and then in your own way you are registering in the mind. So when the exam comes, you will be writing whatever I taught in your own language, not just whatever I said. Okay, so whatever I'm trying to say, whatever concepts I'm trying to teach, that's the way I'm framing each sentence. But the way you are going to frame in your exams will be different from the way I'm telling it. So exactly, the brain has such kind of pattern system of processing and interpreting and again interlinking few things and processing things. But the problem with again autism spectrum disorder is that behavioral change, that process that happens is all disbalanced. Okay, so it could be fluctuating all the time, it could be changing all the time, and self causes a lot of problem at mental and physical level. And at an early stage, people who have ASD have problem communicating, development in cognitive and intellectual skills, and multiple other problems will happen. One of such problems is, like I said, one of the spectrum problem that we talked about is communication, language, social skills and behavior. And finally we talk about a tendency to engage in repetitive behaviors, where kid who is having ASD, that is autism spectrum disorder, will tend to repeat actions. Whatever he does, he will tend to repeat that again and again. He will develop a tendency to repeat certain actions. So having said that, let's move on to the causes of ASD. What all causes the ASD? Okay, so first thing is that genetic factor. Like I said, in many disorders is the same thing. Genetic could be one factor of ASD. Next could be the environmental factor. So what environment you live in, that environment also can cause it. So like I said, all these disorders are not genetic. It could be caused artificially also. That is why it's important to lead a better life and be in a better environment. Then we have brain development. So if you have any disability in brain development, if your brain development is slower, that also can cause autism spectrum disorder. Now having said that, let's move on to our next topic, that is again oppositional defiant disorder. What exactly is oppositional defiant disorder, which is again abbreviated as ODD. Now it's important for you to learn all the abbreviations. I have repeated this point and I have given this tip many times in the class also, in many times in the different sessions also, that learning dates, learning names, learning short forms and abbreviations of certain scientific terms and certain components are very important, because in exam you may not get this full form. You may be directly asked, what do you mean by ODD? That time you may just randomly, if you may not remember the full form of that oppositional defiant disorder. That's why it's important to learn the abbreviation along with the full name of it. So oppositional defiant disorder is again abbreviated as ODD. Okay, so it's important to understand that first. So having said that, let's move on to what exactly it is. Let's see the proper formal formation or the structure in which they have explained it. So it is a set or group of behavioral disorders called disruptive behavior. Okay, what is it? It is a set or group of behavioral disorders called as disruptive behavior disorders. Okay, it is called by this name because children who have these disorders always tend to disrupt those around them. Okay, so people who have this problem, so it is called by this name because children who have these disorders always tend to disrupt those who are around them. So generally, people who are living around them, people who are getting involved around them, they will be disrupted always by these people who have again ODD. So what exactly is the state of ODD? A state of ODD or a disorder of ODD states that a person who have such a kind of disorder, they again disrupt. They have a disruptive behavior. That disruption they will show around to people. So they will be disturbing everybody around them. They will not be keeping silent. They will not be quiet. They will always disturb people around them. They don't like keeping everything cool or everything chill. They always have this tendency. Okay, so the tendency is to again disrupt everybody. So they tend to disrupt people who are around them. So what exactly is it? They tend to disrupt people who are around them. So keep this in mind. If the whole sentence, the whole concept, the whole statement is quite large for you to understand, make a short note in your notebook that ODD is what? ODD is a situation, ODD is a disorder. It is again called as oppositional defiant disorder, where the person who is having ODD or oppositional defiant disorder always have the tendency to again disrupt everybody else who is around them or who is involved in their life. So that's the tendency. So what all causes this disorder? Let's have a quick look at it. First, the first factor is that biological or genetical factor. Okay, what is the first cause of oppositional defiant disorder? Again abbreviated as what? I gave you it. I gave the abbreviation to you. What is it? It is O, D and D. That is called as ODD. Okay, abbreviation expanded as oppositional defiant disorder. The first cause is that biological or genetic factors. So that we studied, it's a common factor for majority of the disorder. Then you have physical factor. Like I said, physical factor could include anything. It could be a genetic physical disability or could be a disability due to any kind of unfortunate accident. Then it could be a psychological factor. Your mental health also is very important. That's why I say a psychological factor can also cause autism. Then you have finally social factors. So social factors, the way you treat everybody else, the way you are getting treated, the way you are getting involved in the society or in your circles or in your little squads or in your little friend circles, all of these things are important because social factors can also artificially cause you ADHD, or again when we talk about social factors can also cause you again ODD. Okay, so all these things we have to keep in mind, all these points we have to keep in mind. I am hoping you are writing all these things down because every small little detail that I am giving is important for the exam, and the best refined content and the best refined details only I have picked and I am teaching you related to that. Okay, so having said that, let's move on to our next one, that is OCD. Okay, what is OCD? OCD is expanded as obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay, this disorder is what? I will explain you what exactly is it, but let's look into the formal statement. Basically, obsessive compulsive disorder is a habit of doing one thing again and again. That person will be again obsessive of doing a certain activity again and again. But let's look at a formal statement. What exactly is OCD again? Okay, it is a mental disorder that affects people of all ages and walks of life. Okay, that could be affecting, this could be affecting any person with any age group. That is one thing. Okay, next is it occurs when an individual gets caught in a cycle of obsessions and compulsions. Okay, when a person continues to do a certain things and gets obsessive about it. Okay, and that person gets obsessive about it when a person gets involved in a cycle of activity, a certain cycle of compulsive activity or obsessions, that can also lead to again OCD. Then it can be said that a person with OCD are plagued by constant thoughts of fears that cause them to perform that ritual or routines. Okay, because their body is used to, because their mind and their body language and the muscle memory is used to doing a particular kind of action, mentally they are having this fear deep inside that if they don't do that activity, it may be problematic for them. So they end up doing that activity. Now I am not telling about it's a very furious activity that they might be doing. It could be simply, writing few lines, or it could be simply washing your hands or taking shower. It could be simply, hand wash is not a bad thing. Cleaning your house is not a bad thing. Brooming is not a bad thing. Then what are we talking about? We are talking about that person performing it again and again unnecessarily at a often time, at a frequency that is not required. Everybody needs to keep their hands sanitized and hands washed. Given all the pandemic that is going on, given all the situations, the unhygienic situations that is going on in the society, it is required for you to keep your hands sanitized and keep yourself healthy and clean. But if you do that every 2 minutes, every 10 minutes, what would people call you? Right? So that is a bad thing. So that is what happens with people who have OCD. So they tend to wash their hands. If you are, and I'm giving an example, it's not just about washing hands, it's not about taking shower or brooming. It could be any activity. A person who is obsessive of certain activity, that person will keep on doing that every often. The frequency of that will increase. That is called as OCD. Okay. So hoping you understood the concept of OCD, that is obsessive compulsive disorder. Let's look into some of the obsession that they may have. The first thing is that they have a fear of harm to themselves or to their loved ones. Okay, harming themselves or harming their loved ones, that fear they have. Second, the fear of contamination by germ. So people who have that, obviously people who are having the OCD of washing their hands, they have this fear of contamination of germs. So they keep on doing that, and that becomes an obsession, and that becomes a mental disorder, and that will be called as OCD, that is obsessional. Again, what is it? What is the full form? What is the full form of that? Obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay, obsessive compulsive disorder. Next, after that, a forceful or driving need to perform things perfectly or correctly. Now certain people will have that habit. For example, a book is stacked. Okay, 6 to 7 books are stacked and kept on top of each other. If one particular book is slightly slanted rightwards, or it is skid or slipped sidewards, then this person who is having that OCD, the person who is having an OCD will not feel well. He will feel something is different with that. He will feel like he will have the urge to go and correct that little little lack of little lack of geometry that they are seeing there. So there is a pattern that you can see. People who have such an obsession, people who have OCD, they develop a habit of keeping everything accurate and perfect. A little bit of change in small little things can cause a little bit of mind disruptions and things like that to them, and that urges them to correct that small little thing. Good. And now you may say that it is good to be perfect, right? And you may have this thought in the mind that it's good, right? That person will become very perfect in everything. That's not the case, because what happens is that at certain places, everywhere, moving, getting irritated by small little things also causes health related problems. Okay, one person kept a book at some place, but it is little slided to the leftwards, or it is slanting to the other words. Automatically this person who is having OCD will feel that urge, or he will get angry, or he will not feel irritated because just looking at it. So those things goes on in the society a lot, and this person will not be able to cope up with the world that we are living in now. So in that sense it is very bad. Okay, otherwise it's a good thing to have everything at a proper place, everything at a proper time, looking at the perfections. You'll be called as a perfectionist in that place. But for every small little things, to the level of detail I'm talking about, that level of detailing at every point of time can be injurious to health mentally, because not everybody will be having that kind of a thought in the mind and will not be practicing that. So the whole point is, we cannot, we have to adapt to this world. We have to get adapted to the world. The world will not get adapted to you. That is a very important point. What is important statement? I want you to keep this in the mind, because this gets applicated at different parts of your life. What is it? The world will not, what is it? You have to get adapted to the world. The world will not get adapted to you. So that's one important thing, and one important statement that I wanted to give you. Having said that, let's move on to the next obsession that we have, that is having excessive doubt on any individual. A person who is having an OCD will have excessive doubt on a particular individual or a particular case. Okay, he will have that tendency to have that doubt. That's one cause, or that's one obsession that may have. Next, a fear of being embarrassed. Okay, so they have a continuous fear of being embarrassed. Then a fear of getting dirty. That's why they always have this. Some people generally have the tendency or OCD of again washing hands, taking shower. All those things will come under that. Then a fear of making mistakes. So they always have the fear of making mistakes. So all these obsession is what drives them to do certain things again and again. These obsessions are the reason why they keep on doing certain things again and again, because these kind of fear keeps triggering them in the mind to perform those activities. Now, hope you understood different kind of obsession that we are talking about. Let's move on to some compulsions. Okay, we'll look into some compulsions. What all compulsions are we talking about? First, repeating things or always moving items to keep them in exact order. Like I said, keeping everything intact, the detailing of that. If one book is kept on top of the another, it should be that if the upper book, the book that is kept on top of the bigger book, if it is small, then the boundary left at every corner should be of the same distance. Okay, at the same margin should be kept. All the small little details also pisses them off. So that's one thing again people who have OCD has. Next, bathing or again washing hands several times. So people who have that kind of obsession will have bathing and showering or washing hands again and again. So that tendency automatically gets developed. What is it? Bathing or washing hands several times. So that's another compulsion people who have OCD gets. Next, checking things over and over again. They will tend to check, they will have the urge to check certain things again and again. Then repeating specific words. Certain words will be again and again repeated. So that's another thing. Again, you have hoarding, then you have constant praying, then you have persistently counting while doing usual tasks. So what is it? Persistently counting while doing certain tasks. So that kind of thing, all these kind of compulsions OCD person will have. Certain things, certain points in every disorder that you talk about, like we talked about the daydreaming in certain situations. We talked about getting irritated by somebody. We talked about short-term burners. We talked about all these different things over here. Now, it doesn't mean that if you have any of those things, you are having this problem. Like I said, it's the other way around. Okay, so people who have these kind of mental disorders have these kind of small little issues and small little mental compulsion disorder. Now these are, though it is considered as a disorder, it's not a major deal, because many of the people have OCDs, and some of the major important and some of the major disruptive and disruptive disorders are autisms and ODD and all those kind of things, because that irritates people and that causes some mass mess. Okay, so if a person who is having ODD is in a public, he will interrupt everybody. That will cause a lot of social issues and a lot of political issues. A person who is having autism will again make a lot of fuss about everything in the society. So all these things you have to keep in mind, the severity of the symptoms, and then you have to treat that person. Okay, so having said that, hoping you understood the different compulsions and different symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder. Now hoping you understood the various compulsions and obsessions of obsessive compulsive disorder, that is OCD, and different kind of other SPD that we studied about different kind of other disorders also. Hope you understood every little detail that I taught you. Hope you understood every little topics that I taught you and the concepts that we covered, and I hope you watched the first session. If you haven't watched the first session, again I'm telling, please go back and watch the first session, then look into this session. Then only you will understand the chapter seamlessly, because it's a timeline. So if you don't follow the timeline properly, if you don't follow each episodes or each session in a sequence, you may miss a lot of things, or some concepts that I'm teaching may skip your mind. Hoping that I'll see you in the third session. In the third session, we'll look into how to manage some of these things and some of the disorders and some of the disability that we are talking about. Having said that, I'll see you in the third session of this chapter. Until then, I'll take a leave from here. This is me, Rohit, signing out until next time. Thank you.